session is on principles of biosafety. For understanding biosafety, it is first very important to understand the term biohazard, because without knowing about biohazard, you cannot understand properly about biosafety. The Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens 1995A, which is one of the another committee or organization, they classified the pathogens according to the hazard and category of containment. Containment means category of controlling them. Is it clear? So the basis of this grouping of microorganism was these 3 points. Okay, that is pathogenic potential of a microorganism. You might be hearing, sometimes we say that Bacillus anthracis or maybe Mycobacterium tuberculosis or maybe Ebola virus is very dangerous. Similarly, we say E. coli, yes, it causes disease, but it is not that much dangerous. Sometimes we call bacteria like Rhizobium, like Lactobacillus. They are very, weak microorganism. They are usually not dangerous. That is what we say, like pathogenic potential, that is disease causing potential. Second thing is route of transmission. Some route of transmissions are very dangerous, like for example, microbes which transmits by respiratory system, by aerosols, by droplets. They are very dangerous. They can spread very quickly, while others may not be transmitting that quickly as a airborne microorganism can do. So pathogenic potential and route of transmission is two very important aspects to classify the microorganism into various risk categories or various hazard groups. But third equally important point, which most of the times people ignores, that is the epidemiological consequences of escape from the laboratory. The meaning of it is, if a microorganism, dangerous microorganism, escapes from the laboratory, what kind of impact it can have on the community. It means, can it spread easily to the community? Can it cause a lot of deaths? Or it will just spread, but no problem, people will not be suffering with it, right? So what kind of epidemiological consequences it may have? So can it spread easily? Can it kill people? Or do we have vaccines already for this organism? Do we have medicines already for this organism? Then no problem, even if it escapes, it will not be able to cause significant consequences in the community, right? So this is the three factors which we will have to consider for dividing the microorganism into various hazard groups. Okay, so based on these three factors combinedly, microorganisms are classified into four hazard groups: hazard group 1, 2, 3, and 4, or you can say risk group 1, 2, 3, and 4. Any way you can classify it, right? Any name you can use, right? So hazard group 1 includes the microorganism which is unlikely to cause human infections or human disease, like lactobacillus, like rhizobium. Maybe they can be kept in hazard group 1, right? Non-pathogenic microorganisms. Then hazard group 2. Now here the severity will increase little bit, right? It is a group that includes the microorganisms that can cause human disease and maybe hazard to the employees who is handling them, especially the laboratory staff. But it is unlikely to spread to the community, and there it usually affects, there is usually effective prophylactic that includes, protective measures like vaccines or maybe other protective measures, or the effective treatment options are available, or both of them are available. Is it clear? Causes disease, but disease is not very severe. It does not spread to the community. And third point is, you know, we may have treatment or prophylactic measures or both the things available, right? This kind of organisms are kept in category 2. For example, like, E. coli, right? Shigella, you can keep Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus, Aspergillus, okay, this kind of microorganisms, okay. Then third category. Now here the microorganism will be little more dangerous, okay. A biological agent or a microorganism that can cause severe human disease, and it also presents a serious hazard to the employees. Okay. Then it may present a risk of spreading to the community. It means the second one was causing mild disease and not spreading to the community, but the category 3 organisms produces severe disease and it can also spread to the community. But even though this spreads, we have effective prophylactic or treatment or both these options available. For example, like Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is a very dangerous organism. It can spread easily to the community, but we have vaccine as well as antibiotics for treatment of it. So that can be kept in hazard group 3. There are many more organisms and examples. Now comes a hazard group 4, very dangerous. The most dangerous category of microorganism is hazard group 4. Okay, it includes the microorganism which causes very severe disease. Okay, they can spread to the community easily. Okay, and there's no treatment or no prophylactic measure is available. No vaccine and no treatment is available. This is called category 4. For example, Ebola virus, Lassa fever virus, St. Louis encephalitis virus. Okay, this kind of organisms comes into this category. I hope it's clear to everyone. Now, with these 3 points, if I ask you about a specific microorganism, like for example, let me ask you Brucella abortus. There's a bacteria called Brucella abortus. According to you, which category it might be falling in? Keeping these 3 points in mind, can you tell me in which category, which hazard group it might be falling in? 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you tell me in which hazard group it might be falling in? Can you answer in chat box? Maybe just guess. If you, some people are writing 3, I am seeing. Oh, everybody is writing 3. Only 3 response for a guess also. Let me see. Maybe somebody is writing 2. 2. 4 responses. Others 40 members. I want 40 responses quickly. 3, 3, 2. Quick. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 3. Brucella abortus. Brucella abortus. 3. Many of them are writing 3. Okay, just forget about this bacteria. So tell me, coronavirus. SARS coronavirus belongs to which category? 1, 2, 3, 4. SARS coronavirus belongs to which category? 1, 2, 3, 4. Quick. 4, 4, 4, 4. Oh, very good. Without thinking, everybody is saying 4. And what about swine flu virus? What do you think about swine flu virus? Swine flu. Now everybody else, everybody please mention about swine flu. 3, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 3, 3. Quick. Okay. Good. Mixed answers. Why I'm getting mixed answers? What is the reason of getting mixed answers? Because all of you are guessing. That is why we are getting mixed answers. And can we do research with just your opinion or just a wild guess? Can we do research work like that? Can we put our life in danger just by the guess of somebody? Obviously not, right? Obviously not. So there's a guideline. If you open the same guideline, this is Advisory Committee of Dangerous Pathogens. This is how the first page of this looks like. This is the link of it. I will share it with you. Let me copy it and just give it to you. If you want, you can just Google search it. You can just put it in search engine. Okay. You will be able to find out this PDF file. Right. And this PDF file, if you open, it is having a list of all the known bacteria and viruses and fungi. And in front of them, it is given that which category they belongs to. I hope it's clear to everyone. You can find out to which category they belongs to. Let me download quickly in front of you itself. Let me use this link. So this is this guideline, Advisory Committee on Dangerous Pathogens. You can go into bottom. Although you can read it, see here onwards the list is starting. This is the category of the organism, right? I hope all of you can see this, right? You can download this and keep it with you. Whenever you are having any doubt, you can cross-check it over here that which microorganism belongs to which category. So which one I was asking to you? Brucella, right? Brucella. So Brucella abortus belongs to group 3, risk category 3. Then what are you asked? Swine flu, I think. No, corona. CORONA. Coronavirus. See, coronavirus belongs to category 2 mainly. SARS related coronavirus belongs to category 3. See, SARS related coronavirus belongs to category 3, and novel coronavirus is also belonging to core category 3, because still we have to download the updated file. I think it has not been updated so far. So from updated file, if you will see, you will find that it also belongs to category 3. Similarly, I was asking you which virus? Swine flu, I think. Swine flu. My spelling is wrong. Like that, you can search in this quickly. Influenza type A, B, C. Influenza, swine flu comes in influenza type A, H1N1. So it's type 2 virus. But most of you were saying type 4, type 3. Okay, so no wild guesses anymore. You can find out directly from this database. I hope it's clear to everyone. All of you, I have given the link. Next time somebody is asking you, please use this. If you don't want to do it, I will also tell you one more option. You just Google search, uh, you know, risk group database. I'll show you quickly. Risk group database. I hope you can see my Google risk group database. Like that, you have to search on Google. Go to the first link itself. Risk group database, which has been, prepared by this American Biological Safety Association. This association has made this. Now here you have a search option in this. If you go over here you can search. For example, I want to search swine flu again. Search. See, came swine flu. See, this is different species of swine flu. African swine flu virus. I'm not interested in this. Vascular, this some swine flu virus. Then we have classical swine flu fever virus, that is Hoga cholera virus. Right? We are interested in this influenza swine flu virus. Belongs to which category? According to NIH, according to BMBL, it belongs to category 2. So here we can find it out. Even they have a mobile app. You can download that mobile app also. You can search the same name, risk group database, and remember this logo. You can find this app, and there you can quickly search in mobile app. I have that in my mobile. Okay, similarly, you can also download that and you can keep it with you. Is it clear to everyone?
So Sanam, excuse me, sir.
Mhm.
Sanam
Yes, sir.
Sanam has written something in chat
Okay.
box.
So can we go for search directly from risk group database? And also that you said, yes, that's what I told you. You can use any one of them. Risk group database, they have prepared from that document only. Okay, it is like automated engine, search engine somebody has created. That's it. Nothing else. Okay, fine. I'll do a small exercise. I don't know if we have sufficient time or not, but quickly we'll do. Okay, what you have to do, I'm going to give you these names. Please find out their maybe first three. Just leave all of them. First three. Try to find out which category they belongs to. Put comma in front of categories. Like if you're finding first one belongs to 2, put 2 comma. Mycobacterium belongs to, for example, 4, put 4 comma 1, whatever. So for first three, all of you, by using any of this interface which I told you, try to find out the categories, risk categories, and please put your answers in chat box. I want all of you to respond. Hope you guys can search. The first organism is Corynebacterium diphtheriae, second is Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and third is Staphylococcus aureus. If some of you want, you can also search the ones which is given in bottom. Just when you are responding the answer, like for example HIV, right in front of it, HIV and category name. Please respond in chat box. Quickly, I'm giving you 2-3 minutes. I think that must be sufficient for doing this. Still no response.
Participants, please do it fast. If someone is having any queries regarding searching it again, you can ask it again if someone is having any query, any question.
So responses, some responses coming, but very few. Corynebacterium, somebody has written group 2, 2, 3 and 2. Okay, Namrata, S aureus, risk group database 2, Mycobacterium 3, Neilmathi saying 2, 3, 2, Staph aureus 2, Mycobacterium 3, Mycobacterium 3, Ebola 4, Typhi 2. Okay, 3, 2, 3, 2. Okay, fine. Those who have done, please also mention that which database you used, whether you use the PDF file that is approved list of dangerous pathogens, or you use that software, whether you use this one, the approved list of biological agents, or you have used this risk group database. Please write the source name also which you have used. 323, okay. Risk group database, fine. Somebody tried to download the app also. Corynebacterium 2, fine. Fine, I think rest of you who have not responded, I'm considering them they're trying. Okay, and you can do it in between and you can respond. And Karma is saying he has used PHDF. So I'm seeing, all of you have given right answers. That means you have learned now how to search about the risk group of a organism. Now, next time somebody asks you whether this organism and whether this organism belongs to which risk group, I think all of you can answer it. And let me tell you, I'm saying it very frankly. I'm attending several PhD vivas and PhD seminars, PhD interviews of many students in microbiology. Majority of times they are also unable to tell what is risk group and what is hazard groups, because it's usually not the part of syllabus in majority of the institutes. I hope all of you are learning some very useful things. So this particular activity we are stopping it over here. Those who are finding, you can post it little later also, right? And here is the result for entire thing. 232, I think that is the that everybody else has reported. You can find out the response for other questions also, other organisms also, right? Because I have also collected the information from the same. So once now you are clear about biohazard, now the important thing is biosafety. So biosafety is the containment principles, technologies, and the practices. So it is the combination of the things, combination of the principles, that is the theories basically. Okay, technologies, techniques or technologies which we can use, and the practices, that how we follow something, right? That are implemented to prevent the unintentional exposure, or you can say the accidental exposure to a pathogen and toxin, or their accidental release, right? So this is called biosafety. As I told you earlier, biosafety is having one more aspect, that is called biosecurity, right? Only the difference will be intentional exposure to the pathogen and toxin, or their intentional release. That is the basic difference. Okay, containment principles, technologies, and practices that are implemented to prevent the intentional exposure to a pathogen and toxin, or their intentional release is called biosecurity. I hope it's clear. Okay, all of you are clear. So that is biosafety. Now in biosafety, there is three factors which is very important. Okay, or there is three essential principles of biosafety. That is standard microbiological practices. Second is safety equipments, and the third is facility design and construction. Okay, so these three things combinedly forming the biosafety lab. Okay, so we are starting with the first one. First and the foremost and the most important aspect of biosafety is SMPs, or standard microbiological practices. Right? Now, this is the most important concept of biosafety, and we should strictly adhere to the basic concept which we are learning during our college times. You might have heard your faculty members saying, especially those who have attended laboratory classes, you should not eat anything, you should not drink when you're working in the lab, right? You should not throw the things here and there. You should wash your hands before leaving the laboratory, right? Girls should tie their hairs properly. You should wear the clothes which covers almost your all body part. You should wear lab coat. Okay, clean your work surface before leaving. Don't do mouth pipetting. You might have heard many instructions from your teacher during your classes. So they all are part of standard microbiological practices. Cleaning the workbenches on time, right? Autoclaving everything before discarding them, right? Handling of glasswares carefully, handling of microorganisms, preserving of microorganisms properly, labeling of cultures properly. All these things are part of standard microbiological practices, and they are the integral part of biosafety. Without knowing structured standard microbiological practices, you are not supposed to work in any biosafety lab, whether it is a small lab or a big lab. Is it clear? And we should be strictly adhering to them. Okay, we should be aware of potential hazard, that which substance we are handling in the lab could be dangerous. So we should know which of the substance could be potentially hazardous to us. Okay, other than that, those whoever is working over there should be well trained and must be expert in a particular technique, whichever technique they want to follow. For example, for your work, you have to use centrifuge. You should know properly how to handle a centrifuge. If you need to use autoclave, you should be properly trained to use autoclave. Otherwise, autoclave is a potential bomb. It can blast any day. Centrifuge can break down and it can spread the culture anywhere, right? So standard microbiological practices are the most important part of biosafety, right? Second thing is the safety equipments, which is also known as primary containment barriers, right? They controls the microorganism in the site where they're actually present. For example, a microorganism can be present in the laboratory. So primary containment barriers will keep you safe directly getting exposed to the microorganisms, right? They basically minimizes the exposure of an individual to the hazard. Okay, they basically prevent contact, and they also contains aerosols, right? Some of the examples of primary containment barriers or safety equipments includes personal protective equipments, which is also known as PPEs. That includes gloves, gowns, respirators, face shield, boot covers, okay, hazmat suits, okay, goggles. There are so many things which can be used. Okay, then we even have positive pressure suits which can be used in by BSL-4 laboratories. We'll talk about that. Then other than this PPEs, we can also use safety cabinet, biosafety cabinets, which is called BSCs. And there are multiple types of biosafety cabinets which can be used effectively in different laboratories. Although I will not be discussing further about biosafety cabinets, because biosafety cabinet in itself is a long topic, so I cannot go into that and explain it further, right? Similarly, some other examples of primary containment barriers includes covered or ventilated animal cage systems, which can be used in laboratories where we are mainly using animals. So I hope the primary containment barriers are clear to you. The safety equipments which can be used is clear to everyone. Last thing is a facility design and construction, okay, which is also known as secondary barrier or engineering controls. Okay, they contributes to the workers' protection. Okay, they protects environment and neighborhood from the laboratory. So what is the examples of facility design and construction? For example, building and laboratory design. As you are seeing, see for example, if you see this photograph, there's two doors. One door is keeping the laboratory intact. Everything is closed, and outside there's nothing. It is just a passage. So double door entry. It's a part of facility design or laboratory design. Is it clear? For example, before going inside the lab, I have to, I have to show my card. Then only that door will open. So it means no unauthorized person cannot go inside. Only authorized person can go inside. Is also a part of laboratory design. Ventilation of the lab is also a part of laboratory design. Okay, use of autoclave, bigger autoclaves. Take a cage washing facilities, sterilization room, decontamination room, media preparation room, right? Freezing room, cold rooms. Okay, like that, designing a laboratory in a better way where we can minimize the exposure. You have seen just now in the starting of the lecture, I showed you that video of that movie. In that, the virus got released into one part of the laboratory facility. What they did, they completely closed it and they filled that entire room with the NaCl. So virus got escaped from its original place, but they contained it in a single room. So again, it was also a part of facility design. In same movie, in that same video, you have seen before entering, they were doing retina scanning, eye scanning. Then only that gate was opening. So it was also a part of facility design. I hope the points are clear to everyone. So all these three factors combinedly resulting into the development of biosafety facilities. Is it clear to everyone? So based on these three major components of biosafety, four biosafety levels can be designed. We will do this activity in a little while. Okay. So they are known as BSL-1 laboratories. BSL stands for Biosafety Level 1, BSL-2, BSL-3, and BSL-4. Okay, biosafety level 1, 2, 3, 4. Biosafety level 1 is used for handling low risk microorganisms or the microorganisms which are belonging to category 1 and category group of risk, while BSL 2, 3, and 4 can be used for handling comparatively dangerous microorganisms. Is it clear? Okay. BSL 4 is the most advanced laboratory and suitable for handling the most dangerous pathogens or most high risk microorganisms. Now, based on this concept, can you tell me why not we only design BSL-4 where we can handle all the microorganism, all dangerous microorganism? What is the then need of designing BSL-1 or
Not
BSL-2?
cost effective, sir.
Somebody who is saying Deepan?
Yes, sir. Not cost effective, sir. They
Okay,
maybe they are more costly to set up the labs, sir.
okay. What about
And then
others?
we need to hand every instruments very carefully, sir, because they are most
Okay,
costly.
that is okay. That is part of that only. Anyways, anybody else is having any other opinion? Should we design only BSL-4, BSL-3 kind of labs, or we should also have BSL-1, 2, 3, or 4 kind of labs? All variety of labs should be there. Yes, no response. I think now people are getting bored. Should I finish quickly? Needed all. Need all BSL-1, 2, 4. Okay. Others? Yes, actually, in the response, Deepan was right that we should have all four type of lab. You know, BSL-4 operation cost. First, their construction cost. Development of a BSL-4 lab is very costly process. Second thing, other than development cost, its operation cost is very costly, very high, and that is the reason for handling low-grade pathogens, low-risk pathogens. For handling low-grade pathogens or weak pathogens, we should have BSL 1 and 2. And then for handling dangerous pathogens, we should have BSL 3 and 4 kind of facilities. This is the basic classification of these 4 laboratories. BSL 1, 2, 3, and 4. BSL 4 is also called as maximum containment laboratories. Okay. Now, BSL 1 laboratories is basically used for basic teaching and research work. Basic teaching and basic research work. Like most of the laboratories you have in colleges, okay, they falls into this category. Although they does not claim in their, laboratories that it is BSL 1, but mostly, usually the college laboratories are BSL 1, or routine laboratories in which you are doing your practical classes mostly. Okay, and the only laboratory practices required in them is GMT, that is good microbiological techniques, which I told you is the most integral part of all biosafety labs. So GMT is only required, no equipments, no safety measures, no primary or secondary barriers are required in this. Okay, safety equipment requirement, none. You can work on open workbench itself. Then comes the biosafety level 2. In biosafety level 2, primary health, it is basically used for primary health services and diagnostics, okay, as well as we can also use it for research. Now in this, what kind of laboratory practices are required? GMT, that is good microbiological techniques, plus protective clothing, that is PPEs, and there should be a sign of biohazard on the door. If you remember some of my slides, I have used this sign. See this sign you're seeing here in the yellow bag. You might have seen this sign in many places. Here you can see this sign, right? This sign is the sign of biosafety. So this sign must be there on the door, and below that sign it should be mentioned biosafety level 2 or BSL 2. Is it clear? So biohazard sign should be there on the gate of the laboratory. Now, what kind of safety equipments are required? Open bench plus BSC. BSC stands for biosafety cabinets. Okay, so that we can contain or control the potential aerosols. Okay, for that biosafety cabinet has to be used, and all the work which can generate aerosols has to be carried out in the biosafety cabinet itself. Okay, then third type of laboratory, BSL 3 laboratory, they are basically required for special diagnostic work as well as for research work. Okay, what is the laboratory practices required? Same as of level 2. That means this is a good microbiological techniques or general microbiological techniques, plus protective clothing. Okay, then controlled access. It means only authorized people are allowed to enter, not unnecessarily people should not go. Directional airflow, that is also very important. Air should come from one direction, from other direction. It means no fan can be used, right? Is it clear? Now what kind of safety equipments are required? Biosafety cabinets and other primary devices for all activities. Then for biosafety level 4, we can use it for handling dangerous pathogens, right? Now what kind of facilities are required? Laboratory practices are required as of level 3, which we have already discussed. GMT is integral part of it. Okay, GMT, protective clothing, directional airflow. Sometime in BSL 4, sorry, directional airflow is not required, and we maintain negative pressure. All these things are so detailed. I can't get into detail right now. Okay, maybe we will be doing a longer workshop of maybe 3 days or 4 days later on. So that time I think I can explain all these things in more detail, right? And shower exit, before going out from the lab, you have to take bath. So that is called shower exit, and special waste disposal units must be there. In this, what kind of safety equipment is required? Class 3 biosafety cabinet, which is the most advanced type of biosafety cabinet, or positive pressure suits. You might have seen in movies or in some videos, some scientists are wearing a big suit, okay, which is filled with air. That is called positive pressure suits. So that suit has to be used. So that can be done. Okay, so this is the kind of safety equipments required. This is how a BSL-1 lab looks like. It's basic lab, no need of having any biosafety cabinet or laminar airflow. You can do your work on normal conditions. Although if you are handling microorganism, a biosafety cabinet can be used. Not biosafety cabinet, laminar airflow can be used. Right? In biosafety level 1, non-pathogenic microorganism could be handled. Standard microbiological practices must be followed, which is very important. Special containment equipments or base biosafety equipments are not required. Staff must be well trained, so then only they will be able to follow the standard microbiological practices. Regular health checks and its documentation must be done. And reporting of illness, if any staff member is getting ill, that has to be done. Or if there is any accident in the laboratory, that also must be reported. So this is the kind of precautions we have to take in biosafety level 1. Then comes biosafety level 2, almost similar kind of lab, only along with this we have a biosafety cabinet and we can have protective clothing. Okay, that's all. Otherwise it is almost same to that of biosafety level 1. Okay, on door hazard signs should be there, as you are seeing here. So staff have specific training in handling the hazardous agents, that is dangerous microorganisms. Access to the laboratory is to the limited people or only to the authorized people. Personal protection by the clothing, by the biosafety cabinets can be done. All procedures in which infectious aerosols or splashes may be created must be conducted in biosafety cabinets. Medical surveillance must be done on periodic basis, maybe once in 3 months or maybe once in 6 months. Laboratory equipment should be routinely decontaminated. It must be cleaned with disinfectants. And then the biohazard warning sign should be displayed on the door as I showed you. Then comes biosafety level 3. Okay, laboratory protective clothing must be of solid front of wraparound gowns, scrub suits, head covering if necessary, and shoe covers can also be used. As you might have seen in case of corona cases nowadays, the people wearing this kind of clothing only, which has been mentioned over here. Laboratory coat after use must be decontaminated by autoclaving before washing process. Right? A complete change of clothing may be necessary before entering and after leaving the laboratory. Handle all the infectious agent in the biosafety cabinet or by other containment methods. Right? Respiratory protective equipments may be necessary. Okay, that is nothing but the mask or respirators, depending on the procedure which you are following. If especially your microorganism is airborne, transmits by air, then this kind of respiratory protection is very important. Then comes the BSL-4 laboratory. I think with diagram itself you can understand how much complex a structure it is. It is usually a multi-story building. It is supposed to be a multi-story building. Otherwise, you cannot make a good biosafety lab. And in that multi-story building also, usually 1 or 2 floors are the working floors. As you are seeing here, what I should say this one first. Second floor is the working floor, while the floor in the bottom and on the top are usually the supporting floors. Okay, they are used for autoclaving purpose or for generation of gases and various other supporting facilities. Usually the working floor will only be one. Other floors are just supporting the working floor, right? And in BSL-4 laboratories, we have 2 models, that is class 3 cabinet laboratories. Okay, here the handling of agent must be done in class 3 biosafety cabinet. Exhaust air from the class 3 biosafety cabinet must pass through the must pass through 2 HEPA filters prior to the release to external environment. And then second variant of BSL-4 laboratory we have is suit laboratory. Here, decandent room air supply and exhaust system are required, and one-piece positive pressure suit, the air suit which I was talking to you earlier. Okay, like it looks like astronaut suits. Okay, one-piece positive pressure suit, positive pressure supply air protective suit must be worn by the laboratory personnel while working in this kind of lab. Okay, entry must be limited by a secure locked door. Only authorized person should be allowed. No one should work alone in the lab. At least 2 persons should be working so that if any accident happens, other person can take care of it. Okay, an inner disposable pair of gloves. It means double layer of gloves must be worn to prevent if there is any damage to the outer gloves, still you will be protected by the inner gloves. So 2 pair of gloves must be used. A method of communication for emergency contact. Because you are wearing suits, it will be difficult for you to communicate, speak. Because even if you speak more, carbon dioxide level may increase. Other than that, you are wearing suits, so and your colleague is also wearing suits, so that sound will not go easily. So maybe some kind of sign language or some kind of coding can be developed where they can communicate for small things without speaking also. Okay. There must be a controlled air system, that is negative pressure, which is maintained in the laboratory. Negative pressure is like less pressure than that of outside atmosphere. Our atmosphere is having a air pressure. Usually in the room also we have same kind of pressure. Okay, but if there is negative pressure in the room, nothing from the room can go out in the lab, out from the lab to the environment. Is it clear? That is the advantage of having negative pressure. Sometime when it's very windy, okay, when there is wind, you might have felt like when you are opening the door of your room, sometime you might be finding it's very difficult to open the room because your room is heavily filled with the air, and when you're trying to pull the door, it is not getting pulled because of that air pressure. That is positive pressure, right? As soon as you will open the door, a lot of air will go out, right, because of that positive pressure, heavy pressure inside the lab. But similarly, if there is negative pressure, outside air may come inside, but from inside nothing can go outside. Air cannot go outside, which may have the microorganisms with it, so that the release of microorganisms from the lab can be prevented. That's why we use negative pressure. I hope all of you might have understood. You might have seen some items which comes vacuum packed, like cashews, this walnuts, tea, like Taj Mahal tea. Some of you might be purchasing it. They're vacuum packed. If you make a small hole into it, what happens? Does it throw air outside? No, it always throw air inside. The same way, if you buy a chips pack, Lays or any other chips, if you make a small hole, it just throws the air outside. That is positive pressure. Okay, that vacuumly packed kind of thing is negative pressure. I hope all of you have understood with these examples what is the difference in positive and negative pressure and what is the advantage of it. Right? A double door pass-through autoclaves must be readily available for materials passing out from the class 3 biosafety cabinets. A chemical shower must be provided for decontamination of positive pressure suits before the laboratory staff leaves the laboratory, right? And a separate detailed work manual and an emergency program should be developed. Okay, so that's all basics of biosafety.